two very smart people who are going to help me sift through it all. David Schoen is an attorney who represented Donald Trump during his second impeachment trial. And Renato Mariotti is an attorney and a former federal prosecutor. Thank you to you both for being here. David, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to give you the latitude here to take your pick, my friend. The list again, in case it's hard to remember: the special master, the New York Attorney General's case, Mark Meadows and the subpoena, John Kelly's book, and the King Abdullah business with the West Bank, and Trump's health, mental health, etc. So go ahead. It's yours.
I'll give you a couple of snippets on each, if you don't mind, then. Judge Dearie. Judge Dearie's, well-respected judge, senior status. If you were to have a criminal case in the Eastern District of New York and you drew Judge Dearie, I practiced there for the past 30 years or more, you'd be happy with getting Judge Dearie. But I think it speaks volumes that Andrew Weissman tweeted out that he can't understand why Trump would have picked Judge Dearie. Judge Dearie's a man of integrity and so on and so forth. He's not a guy who is going to go out on a limb, let's put it that way. He's a straight shooter, and if one were to pick on the balance of the scales, one would say he would favor the Department of Justice over the claims made by President Trump, but we'll see what happens. In terms of the Attorney General, in my view, again, process is important. Attorney General James goes well beyond the bounds of ethics in her public comments. If she wants to proceed with this case, she should be proceeding with it behind closed doors and in the courtroom. She made a campaign pledge about going after Trump. I think it was completely inappropriate, and I think it demeans the process. Anyway, I'll give the other fellow a chance to talk about it.
There's so much more, right? There's the Mark Meadows. There's John Kelly's book. I'll come back to you because there's all this on the menu. So, Renato, let's talk about that claim. I also found it odd for an attorney general to campaign based upon prosecuting someone, but I think for her base that was red meat, and people really liked it. At least the people who voted for her in New York, but the rejection of the plea deal, I am always fascinated by that. And I think for our viewers, it would be helpful for someone of your esteem to explain how often that happens. How often do New York attorneys general or state attorneys general throughout the country actually reject somebody who comes to them in a big, expensive, and public case and say, no deal?
Well, it happens fairly regularly because often the attorney general has a lot of leverage. And here, I think a lot of leverage is given by what you mentioned a moment ago, Ashleigh. You said that the former president took the fifth many, many, many times in a deposition, and so did his family members. Well, you also said you would have given him the same advice, and so would I. But here's the downside. When I represent clients all the time who have issues in the criminal and civil side, and when you're in that situation, you're in a bit of a bind because while in the criminal, because you have criminal matters, you don't want to testify because it could create problems for you on the criminal side. On the civil side, actually taking the fifth can be used against you, and in fact, a jury could be instructed to make an adverse inference. In other words, to indicate, to presume that your answers would have been harmful to your side. So it really gives a lot of leverage to the attorney general. So I suspect she understands this. She understands that the adverse inference could be helpful to her. She understands that the Trump family and his business would not want that to go forward. So she's going to be pressing the leverage to get the best deal possible in that litigation. So, I mean, for what it's worth, I think that's the situation they're in, and it's a difficult position to be in when you're facing war on multiple legal fronts, as often is the case when you're under a criminal investigation.
So about those legal fronts, David Schoen, I do want to ask you about the politics of it, because that's what everybody's saying, right? If you're on either side of this, you say Trump is being persecuted because he's Trump, and it's all Democrats going after him, and it's all Democrat-led states where these AGs or even the DOJ, which is Democrat-led, they say at this point, they say it's all political, right? But if you look at the larger 30,000 view, there are plenty of Republicans who've come after him as well. So Jeffrey Berman, with his new book, saying he was constantly pressured inappropriately as a U.S. attorney by Trump and his DOJ. There's Bill Barr, his own attorney general, who said, yeesh, a million things. There's Robert Mueller, who has not said so much, but said much in his actions, right? And James Comey as well. These are all Republicans, all Trump appointees. So is it fair to sort of always castigate the investigations and the accusations against Trump and say they're political when oftentimes they come from Republicans?
Well, the fact that they come from Republicans, to me, doesn't mean that they're not political. There's a significant part of the Republican Party that would prefer to see Donald Trump off of the scene for a number of varied reasons. But, you know, all of the people you've mentioned have different agendas also. I mean, Jeffrey Berman was fired. He's got his own sour grapes and all of these tell-all books I put zero faith in. I've been interviewed by a number of the people who have written them, and they don't get the facts right generally, but he has his own agenda. Mueller, to me, had a conflict from the start, comes out of WilmerHale, the firm that represents Hillary Clinton. He picked members of his commission that the public couldn't have confidence in. That's a problem. We can go on down the list. Many people felt Bill Barr wasn't the guy for the job, but there may be merit to some of their allegations. The problem is when you politicize things so badly, like Attorney General James and others, you lose at least half the population that wants to believe it's political in the first place by demeaning that process, by making it a political partisan weaponization of the process. And now the timing is especially bad before the midterms. It plays into all of that. I want to get to one other subject, if you don't mind, just the Mark Meadows thing quickly.
I want to say here for a moment and correct the record, because I have to say anybody who thinks that Robert Mueller and the way he conducted himself in that investigation is political is full of crap. I have to say Robert Mueller's professionalism, grace, and his restraint in refusing to make a judgment regarding Donald Trump's guilt, despite overwhelming evidence that he found and cataloged, I have to say it really takes the cake, because Robert Mueller, I think, exercised great restraint and care and, frankly, treated Donald Trump with fairness that he did not deserve.
Yeah, I think you
David,
couldn't be more
you
wrong.
wanted to add something.
By composing the panel of the members that he composed, by choosing Andrew Weissman as his top deputy, he sent a message across the board. Andrew Weissman is the most unethical, most ethically bankrupt prosecutor I have ever dealt with in a case in my life. He put Jeannie Rhee on the committee. She represents Hillary Clinton personally.
He handled many cases against prosecutors, I'll tell you that much. There's a lot of very difficult prosecutors out there. You know, I hear what you're saying about Andrew Weissman, but Robert Mueller, I think his actions and his words spoke volumes. His testimony was measured. His words, as written in that report, were very careful and very measured and showed great restraint.
I'll also say about Andrew Weissman, he is a commentator on MSNBC. It's a very liberal network as well. And so whenever I hear his commentary, there is absolutely no benefit of the doubt with regard to the president. There's never even sort of a sampling of what could be. I do often hear a very, very reasoned argument, I will say, on his behalf. But, you know, there's always the bias by omission on those channels, which makes me crazy. So I do want to ask one more question, David Schoen, and that's about the kids. Do you have any idea which of the one children these reports are, you know, pointing to who could be in the line of fire by the New York AG?
I really don't. I mean, I'm friendly with the lawyer who represents one of them, so I'd rather not speak about that. But I really don't know, and she'll go after, I think, whoever she wants to. I would say to you on the Mark Meadows thing, you know, he's walked a line all of this time. He's represented by George Terwilliger, former Department of Justice official, well-respected guy, and Meadows has tried to cooperate from day one. Problem is he has a number of privilege issues in there. Judge Nichols, actually just last week, who's sitting on a case with Mr. Meadows, was angry with the commission, with the January 6th commission, for trying to force his hand on those privilege issues. So there's a lot going on with Mark Meadows. He's an honest and decent guy. I've gotten to know him pretty well.
So, Renato, I only have a minute left, but I want to give that to you. I want you to, respond to the Mark Meadows issue as well, but throw in the 54 days to midterms while we're at it. Is this why this is all happening? Is this all geared towards the timing and the midterms, or is this just the slow pace of justice kind of dribs out when it dribs?
Yeah, I do think it's the slow pace of justice. In fact, Ashleigh, I don't think the Justice Department is going to be doing a lot in terms of overt steps, investigative steps between now and the midterms. Regarding Mr. Meadows, I think he's complying with his legal obligations. That's why, of course, he wasn't charged with contempt of Congress. We'll see ultimately what happens there. But I will say, definitely aggressive moves by the Justice Department. And if I was looking at the many different investigations that the former president is facing, I think the biggest concern should be for him that documents case, given the quantum of proof there. I think that has to be a grave concern, and it's hard to see otherwise.
Well, we did not solve all the world's problems tonight. We certainly just scratched the surface, so both of you have to come back. Thank you so much, David Schoen and Renato Mariotti. Really love talking to you.
Thank you, Ashleigh.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.